Somewhere in Bangladesh, right now, there is a door. It is made of iron. It is old, and it has not been opened from the inside in a very, very long time. Behind that door, there is a room, 6 feet wide, 8 feet long, that is smaller than most people's bathrooms. And inside that room, a person is sitting, waiting, not for dinner, not for a phone call. They are waiting to find out if today is the day they die. This is not a movie set. This is not fiction. This is a real place, in a real country, and it is happening right now, as you watch this video. Welcome to Bangladesh's death row. But before we go any further, if you have never been to this channel before, you are about to see something that most people never get to see. The stories inside these walls have been buried for decades, hidden behind iron doors, government silence, and fear. What we are about to show you is the truth. And the truth, as you will discover, is far stranger and far darker than anything you could imagine. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now, because this is exactly the kind of story we bring you, and you do not want to miss what comes next. Bangladesh is a small country in South Asia, surrounded mostly by India, with a small border with Myanmar to the southeast. It has about 170 million people. That's more people than Russia, packed into a country roughly the size of the state of Iowa in America. It is a country of rivers, of rice fields, of bright colors and loud markets. To a visitor, it can feel full of life. But underneath that life, something dark has been growing for decades. As of the latest available records, Bangladesh has approximately 3,739 people sitting on death row. That number is not a typo. 3,739 human beings, all sentenced to die. To put that in perspective, that is more people than many small towns. Imagine an entire town, full of people, teachers, fathers, mothers, young men who were barely adults when they were arrested, and every single one of them waking up each morning not knowing if this is their last day alive. That is Bangladesh's death row. Because unlike countries like the United States, where executions are announced publicly, where last meals are photographed, where final words are recorded and released to the press, Bangladesh does it differently. Very differently. In Bangladesh, executions happen at midnight, quietly, inside the jail walls. And by the time the sun rises the next morning, it is already done. The family is informed after the fact. There is no live stream. There is no press conference. There are no cameras. It simply happens. And then silence. So how do we know what happens inside? How do we know what these prisoners feel, what they eat, what they say in their final moments? That is what this documentary is going to show you. But first, you need to understand what life inside Bangladesh's condemned cell actually looks like. Because nothing could prepare you for it. The condemned cell. That is what they call it. Not a cell. Not a room. A condemned cell. Even the name tells you something. When a prisoner in Bangladesh is sentenced to death, they are moved to this special section of the prison. In most cases, that means Dhaka Central Jail or Kashimpur Jail, both located in or near the capital city. And once they enter the condemned cell, a new kind of life begins, if you can even call it life. The room is 6 feet wide and 8 feet long. The prisoner sleeps there, eats there, uses the toilet there, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But it gets worse. There is something called the 22-2 rule. It is not written in any law. It is just what happens. For 22 hours of every single day, the prisoner stays locked inside. The door does not open. No visitors. No sunlight. No sound from the outside world. For 2 hours, just 2, they are allowed out. Once to bathe. Once for a brief walk in a small enclosed yard. That is it. Imagine spending 22 hours a day in a room smaller than your bathroom. Day after day. Month after month. Some prisoners stay in that room for years before their execution date is confirmed. Some stay for decades. And every single day, there is a moment that every condemned prisoner in Bangladesh describes the same way, a moment of pure terror. It is the moment when the door rattles. Because when a guard comes to the door, it could mean one of two things. It could mean it is time for your 2-hour break, your bath, your walk, or it could mean something else entirely. Every single morning, for 20 years, Sheikh Zah had heard the footsteps of the guard coming down the corridor, and his heart stopped. Every single morning. He never got used to it. He'd press himself against the back wall of his cell and just wait. Wait to see if the door opened slowly, which meant it was just routine, or if there were more footsteps, more voices, more people coming. Because more people meant only one thing. We'll come back to Sheikh Zahid's story, because what happened to him and how he ended up on death row in the first place, is one of the most disturbing parts of this entire documentary. It speaks to a problem at the very heart of Bangladesh's justice system. Sheikh Zahid isn't the only one who walked out of that condemned cell alive. There are others, men and women who spent years, sometimes decades, inside the condemned cell, only to be eventually exonerated, proven innocent, and released. When they came out, they were changed. Some could barely speak. Some couldn't sleep in a normal bed because they'd spent so long on a concrete floor. Some of them walked outside and just stood completely still for several minutes, staring at the sky. They hadn't seen an open sky in so long. Their eyes didn't know what to do with it. One woman, her name is Majida Begum, was arrested while she was 7 months pregnant. She gave birth inside the condemned cell. For 6 years, she raised her baby boy inside those 6x8 walls, surrounded by iron and silence. Her child learned to walk on a concrete floor and talk in a room smaller than a parking space. Then one day, she was told the charges against her had collapsed, that she was free. What that moment felt like, what it does to a person, we'll get to that. But right now, there's something even darker we need to talk about. A question that, once you hear it, you won't be able to stop thinking about. If innocent people are coming out of Bangladesh's condemned cells, how many guilty people never made it out at all? That question has no easy answer. And the deeper we go into this story, the more uncomfortable it becomes. Before we go further, drop a comment below. Tell us, did you know Bangladesh has over 3,700 people on death row? Most people have no idea. Let us know what shocked you most so far. And make sure you resubscribe to Crime Report TV so you don't miss the rest of this investigation. In Bangladesh's death row prisons, there's an unspoken tradition. It has no official name, no written procedure, no government webpage explaining it. But every guard, warden, and official knows it. The prisoners themselves have a name for it: the midnight walk. If you're on death row in Bangladesh, those are the 2 words you fear most. Here's how it works. Executions in Bangladesh happen at midnight. Not in the morning, not at noon. At midnight. When the country is asleep, the streets are quiet, and the world is still. The prisoner is never told in advance. Let that sink in. In many countries, a condemned prisoner gets days, even weeks, of notice. Time to write letters, to say goodbye, to prepare. In Bangladesh, the notice can come just hours before. Sometimes even less. A guard arrives. The cell door opens. And the prisoner is told, tonight is the night. No warning, no build-up. One moment, you're in your cell. The next, you learn you won't see another sunrise. What happens in those final hours? The words, the thoughts, the feelings, is a story almost never told. Until now, we know something about the final hours of a small group of men because their stories, in fragments, leaked out. Family members spoke. Lawyers broke their silence. And the truth, piece by piece, came to light. The most documented executions in Bangladesh's modern history are all linked to a single event: the 1971 Liberation War. In 1971, Bangladesh fought a brutal 9-month war for independence from Pakistan. It was a conflict that saw unimaginable horror. An estimated 3 million people were killed. Entire villages were razed. Women were systematically attacked. Intellectuals were hunted down and murdered. It was one of the worst atrocities of the 20th century, yet for decades, those responsible faced almost no consequences. Then, in 2010, everything changed. Bangladesh established a special court, the International Crimes Tribunal. Its mission was simple: find the people who committed those crimes in 1971, put them on trial, and hold them accountable. What followed were years of trials, painful testimonies, and old men in courtrooms listening as survivors recounted horrors from 4 decades prior. One by one, the verdicts came in: guilty, and the sentences, death. The first name you need to know is Abdul Qadir Mullah. He was 65 years old when they hanged him. He was a politician, a senior leader in a major Islamic party called Jamaat-e-Islami. To his supporters, he was a respected religious figure, a community leader. To the tribunal, he was a man responsible for mass murder, torture, and crimes against humanity. The evidence included harrowing survivor testimonies, people who swore they watched him, or men under his command, kill their families. He was sentenced to death. His lawyers appealed. His supporters flooded the streets, clashing with those who demanded his execution. The nation was torn in two, but the appeals failed. On the night of December 12, 2013, Abdul Qadir Mullah was taken from his cell for his own midnight walk. He was told tonight was the night. We don't know much about what happened in that room, but those present say he maintained his innocence to the very end, insisting the charges were political and that history would judge him differently. At midnight, he was hanged at Dhaka Central Jail. He was the first person executed by the International Crimes Tribunal. He would not be the last. The second name is Ali Hassan Muhammad Mujahid. He was the Secretary General of Jamaat-e-Islami, one of the most powerful political figures in the country. Like Mullah, he was convicted of crimes against humanity from 1971. But his case had a unique twist. A choice. In Bangladesh, a condemned prisoner has one final option: appeal to the president for clemency. It's called a mercy petition, a last-ditch plea for your life to be spared. Most prisoners file it. Most beg for their life. Mujahid refused. He told his lawyers he would not ask for mercy. Not because he accepted the verdict. He denied the charges until his final breath, but because filing a mercy petition, in his view, would be an admission of the court's authority over him. He refused to give them that. So, the petition was never filed. His fate was sealed not by a judge's gavel or a president's signature, but by his own refusal to ask for a life he believed was being unjustly taken. And so, he too walked the midnight walk. On the night of November 21st, 2015, two men on death row were told their time was up. One was Ali Hassan Muhammad Mujahid. The other, Salatin Qadir Chowdhury, a former member of parliament. Both were to be executed together. Both had refused to seek clemency from the president. Both maintained their innocence to the very end. At midnight, they were hanged. Their families were not there. They were only informed after the fact, in the early hours of the morning, that it was over. What were their final moments like? What did they eat that night? What were their last words? Did they pray? Did they cry? Or did they just sit in silence, waiting for the end? We'll never know. The answers to those questions are locked away forever within the cold, silent walls of Dhaka Central Jail. And then came Modiur Rahman Nizami. His case was different. Nizami wasn't just another politician. He was the emir, the supreme leader of Jamaat-e-Islami Bangladesh, the highest-ranking figure in the entire party. The charges against him were the most severe of all: genocide, murder, rape, and the systematic killing of intellectuals during the final days of the 1971 war. He was convicted and sentenced to death. And just like the others, he refused to file a mercy petition, seeing it as an admission of guilt. But here's what sets Nizami's story apart, a detail that sticks with you. In the days leading up to his execution, his legal team fought desperately. They filed emergency motions, argued procedural points, and challenged constitutional issues. Anything to buy more time, to delay the inevitable. But every single attempt was rejected. The legal road had run out. On the night of May 10, 2016, the footsteps finally came to Nizami's cell door. He was 73 years old. He had already spent years in the condemned cell, watching other men from his party walk that same final path before him. He knew exactly what was coming. His family later revealed that in his last communication, he was calm. He spoke of faith, of God, of the belief that another world awaited him beyond this one. Whether that truly brought him peace, no one can say for sure. At midnight, Modiur Rahman Nizami was hanged. The prison fell silent. The city of Dhaka slept on. And by the time the morning call to prayer echoed across the rooftops, his execution was already a part of history. Now, everything we've discussed so far involves men who were convicted through a legal process. They had trials, lawyers, and appeals, at least on the surface. But there's another group of people on Bangladesh's death row. A group whose stories are far more disturbing, far more complicated. These are the people who argue they should never have been there in the first place. Not just as a desperate claim of innocence that every prisoner makes, but because a troubling number of them were eventually proven to be right. So how did they end up in a condemned cell, facing execution for a crime they didn't commit? That question leads us to a much darker place. It leads to a small room, a room that exists before the prison, before the trial. If you're still with us, and we know you are, make sure you hit that subscribe button for Crime Report TV right now. Because what we're about to show you next is the part that will genuinely disturb you. The part that could change the way you think about justice itself. You won't want to miss this. Before a person ends up on death row in Bangladesh, something happens to them. Something that takes place not in a courtroom, not in front of a judge, not with lawyers present or cameras rolling or anyone watching. It happens in a small room, usually at night, usually after an arrest. A room inside a police station that has no windows, no records, no witnesses. And what happens in that room is the part of this story that changes everything. Because in that room, confessions are made, not always freely. In 2020, researchers from the University of Dhaka's Department of Law published a landmark report. It was the first study of its kind ever conducted in Bangladesh. They interviewed the families of 39 people sitting on death row. They reviewed court records. They traced cases from arrest all the way to sentencing. And what they found was not what most people expected. The report found that the overwhelming majority of people on Bangladesh's death row shared the same profile. They were not masterminds. They were not crime bosses. They were not people of power or influence. They were poor. Almost all of them had little or no formal education. Most were day laborers, rickshaw pullers, small farmers, people who lived hand to mouth, day to day. People who, when they were arrested, could not afford a good lawyer. People who, in many cases, could not even fully understand the legal proceedings happening around them. And almost all of them, according to their families, said the same thing about how their confessions were obtained. They said they were tortured. Now, it is important to say this clearly. These are allegations. Bangladesh's government denies systematic torture in police custody, and not every person who claims innocence is innocent. But here is what makes these testimonies impossible to simply dismiss. Some of them were proven true. Remember Sheikh Zahid, the man who spent 20 years in a condemned cell? He was a young man when he was arrested, with no significant criminal record, from a poor family in rural Bangladesh. When the police came for him, he had no money for a private lawyer. He was assigned a legal aid attorney provided by the state. According to his testimony, what happened next followed a pattern that the University of Dhaka researchers would later document across case after case. He was taken to a police station. He was held. And in that small room with no windows, pressure was applied. Physical pressure, his family says, until he signed a confession. He could barely read. He didn't fully understand what the document said. He signed it. That confession became the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. He was convicted, sentenced to death, and moved to a 6x8 room in Dhaka Central Jail, where he would spend the next 2 decades waiting to die. 2 decades. His hair went gray in that room. His mother died while he was in there. The world outside changed in ways he could not see or feel or touch. And every morning, the footsteps, the rattling door, the terror. Then, slowly, something shifted. A lawyer took an interest in his case. Documents were reviewed, and cracks began to appear in the prosecution's evidence. Serious cracks. After 20 years, Sheikh Zahid walked out of the condemned cell. Not because he escaped, not because of a pardon, but because the case against him fell apart under scrutiny. He stood outside the prison gates and just looked up at the sky. People who were there said he stood completely still for a long time. When asked how he felt, he struggled to find words. He said the sky looked different than he remembered, bigger somehow, and brighter. He also said something quiet and devastating. He said he still didn't feel free, because 20 years in a condemned cell doesn't leave a person when they walk out the gate. It follows them. He said that even in his own home, he still sometimes woke up in the night and reached out to touch the wall, checking, in that half-awake moment, whether the wall that had been his entire world was still there. And then there is Majida Begum. She was 7 months pregnant when they came for her. She was accused of involvement in a murder case, charges her family denied completely. But like Sheikh Zahid, she was poor. Like Sheikh Zahid, she had no powerful lawyer. And like Sheikh Zahid, she found herself in the condemned cell before she fully understood what was happening. She gave birth inside Dhaka Central Jail. A baby boy, born into a world of iron doors and concrete floors. Bangladeshi prison rules allow for infants to remain with their mothers for a time. So Majida's son grew up, in those early years, inside the condemned cell with her. He learned to walk on a concrete floor. His first view of the sky was through a small barred window, high up on the wall. Majida later said that the hardest part was not her own fear of death. She held that fear every single day for 6 years. And then, like Sheikh Zahid, the case against her collapsed. The evidence was found to be deeply flawed. She was exonerated. She walked out of the condemned cell with her young son, who had spent a significant portion of his early life inside a death row prison without ever committing any crime at all. What do you say about a system that can do that? What word do you use? The researchers from the University of Dhaka used careful, academic language in their report. They talked about structural flaws, about systemic issues, about the need for policy interventions. But underneath all of that careful language, the finding was simple and brutal. In Bangladesh, the people most likely to end up on death row are not necessarily the most dangerous criminals. They are the most vulnerable people, the poorest, the least educated, the ones with no connections, no money, no voice. The ones who, when a police officer puts a piece of paper in front of them in a dark room and tells them to sign, they sign. Because they do not know what else to do. Because they are terrified. Because no one is coming to help them. The trial, the verdict, the condemned cell, the 22 hours of silence, the rattling door, the waiting. So what happens at the very end? What is the last night actually like for a person who knows, who has finally been told that tonight is their night? The honest answer is that we do not fully know. Bangladesh does not release that information. There are no official last meal records. There are no transcripts of final words published by the prison service. But from the fragments that have leaked out, from lawyers who were present, from family members who received final messages, from prison officials who spoke quietly, off the record, a picture emerges. In most cases, the prisoner prays. Bangladesh is a majority Muslim country, and most of the people on death row are Muslim. In those final hours, many of them turn to prayer, to the Quran, to the rituals they have known since childhood. Some ask for specific food, not elaborate, not extravagant. Simple things, rice and fish, a particular dish their mother used to make. Something that tastes like home, like before, like the life they had before the door closed. Some write letters, to their children, to their parents, to the wives or husbands they have not been allowed to properly touch in years. Some say nothing at all. And then midnight comes, and the footsteps come, and the door opens for the last time. As of today, approximately 3,739 people are still waiting in Bangladesh's condemned cells, still pressing themselves against walls in the morning when they hear footsteps, still counting the hours of their 2-hour daily break, still looking up at small barred windows and watching the light change from morning to afternoon to evening to night. Among them, no one can say with certainty, there may be innocent people, people whose confessions were signed in dark rooms, people whose lawyers were not good enough, people whose cases have never been properly reviewed. And among them, there are also people who did terrible things, who took lives, who caused suffering that cannot be undone. The difficulty, the real, profound difficulty, is that in a system with this many cracks, it is not always easy to tell which is which. That is not a comfortable thought to end on, but it is an honest one. If this documentary made you think, if it made you feel something, then it did exactly what it was supposed to do. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. And if you are new to Crime Report TV and you have stayed with us all the way to the end, then you already know. This is the kind of content we make. Subscribe, turn on notifications,